Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to replace the front wheel bearing and hub on a Honda S2000. Front wheel bearings and hubs don't typically go bad, but I'm replacing my front wheel hub and bearing because I snapped one of my wheel studs. Unless you have access to a 20-ton hydraulic press at least, and various tools required for this job, I highly recommend taking your wheel knuckle to your local mechanic to have the bearings pressed in and out. Anyway, let's get to it. The first thing you want to do is remove the front wheel knuckle. If you need help doing this, I've got videos that will be linked down below. With the wheel knuckle off the car, you'll want to use a 10mm socket to remove the two bolts securing the brake line mount to the wheel knuckle. Next, you'll want to remove the axle nut dust cover. Use something sharp like a mechanic's pick or a chisel to create a gap between the dust cover and the knuckle. Once you've created a gap, you can slowly work your way around the hub and pry the dust cover away using a flathead screwdriver with a rubber mallet. Finally, pop the dust cover off with a twist of a larger flathead screwdriver. Once the dust cover is removed, you should be able to see the axle nut. For this video, I will be removing the axle nut using an impact gun, but you can also remove the axle nut while the knuckle is still on the car by using a large breaker bar. Use a powerful impact gun and a 36mm socket to remove the axle nut securing the wheel hub to the knuckle. Once the axle nut is loose, remove it along with the ABS pulser. Once the axle nut is removed, you can move your wheel knuckle to the hydraulic press. Setting up the wheel knuckle to press the old wheel hub out is one of the most awkward parts of this whole process, since the dust shield is in the way and it's hard to adequately support the wheel knuckle. You'll want to mount the wheel knuckle so that the outside of the wheel knuckle is facing down. The best way to do this is to insert one support plate underneath the caliper bracket mounts and insert the other support plate underneath the tie rod area. The support plates that come with the 20-ton Harbor Freight press work perfectly for this job, while the ones that came with a 12-ton Harbor Freight press weren't large enough. This is partly why I think the Harbor Freight 20-ton press is perfect for this job. Carefully press the old wheel hub out of the wheel knuckle. As you start applying pressure to the wheel knuckle, the dust cover will bend a bit and the wheel knuckle will be fully supported by the support plates. The wheel hub should come out extremely easily. Before you go and press out the old wheel bearing, you will need to remove the snap ring that holds the wheel bearing in place. Use a set of snap ring pliers to squeeze the snap ring until it is small enough to be removed. You can use a screwdriver to help pry the snap ring out. Now you should be ready to press the old wheel bearing out. Mount the wheel knuckle on the press so that the outside of the wheel knuckle is facing down. Ideally, you'll want to mount the wheel knuckle on a metal sleeve that is wide enough to support the wheel knuckle and also allow the bearing to pass through. I'm using a metal sleeve and adapters that came in a front wheel bearing removal kit that I'll link in the description box down below. Insert an adapter that fits just onto the wheel bearing and use the hydraulic press to push the wheel bearing out. I will note that it may take a shocking amount of force to get the bearing to initially break free. I was unable to break the original wheel bearing free with a 12-ton press and had to upgrade to a 20-ton press. Now it's time to install the new wheel bearing. Mount the wheel knuckle on the press so that the outside of the wheel knuckle is facing up. Again, you'll want to support the back side of the wheel knuckle using a metal sleeve. The back side of the wheel knuckle will have shaved areas specifically for this purpose. There are a couple important things you have to keep in mind. When you press the new bearing into the knuckle, you want to press it in such that pressure is applied to the outer race of the bearing. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that the bearing has two different sides, one with a rubber seal and one with a metal seal. The side with the rubber seal should be facing the outside of the wheel knuckle, while the side with the metal seal should be facing down towards the inside of the knuckle. Carefully press the new wheel bearing into the wheel knuckle while taking time to ensure that it is going in straight. Press the wheel bearing into the wheel knuckle until it stops moving and you start to feel resistance. Before you press in the new wheel hub, you will need to reinstall the snap ring that you removed earlier. Use a set of snap ring pliers to squeeze the snap ring until it is small enough to be installed into the wheel knuckle. Now you're ready to install the new wheel hub. Mount the wheel knuckle on the press so that the outside of the wheel knuckle is facing up. Instead of supporting the back side of the wheel knuckle using a metal sleeve, you will instead want to support the inner race of the wheel bearing. It is really important that the inner race of the wheel bearing is supported, otherwise you can damage the wheel bearing and ruin this whole job. Whatever you use to support the inner race should also have clearance for the wheel hub itself, since that will be pressed through the wheel bearing and exposed underneath. I personally use a 1 13/16 inch socket that I had lying around. Once the wheel knuckle is supported, insert the new wheel hub into place and stack an adapter on top of it. Carefully press the new wheel hub into the wheel knuckle while taking time to ensure that it is going in straight. Press the wheel hub into the wheel knuckle until it stops moving and you start to feel some resistance. Once the wheel hub is pressed in, you should be able to confirm that it was done correctly by spinning the wheel hub by hand. The rotation should be quiet and smooth without any play. Now comes the fun part, installing the front axle nut. First off, install the ABS pulser onto the wheel hub, and then apply a very light coating of grease to the face of the axle nut and thread it onto the wheel hub. Use a powerful impact gun and a 36mm socket to tighten the axle nut onto the wheel hub. Just like the rear axle nut, the front axle nut is supposed to be torqued to 242 foot-pounds. Unlike the rear axle nut, the OEM specification of 242 foot-pounds seems to actually hold up over time. Obviously, with an impact gun, it is impossible to accurately measure the torque being applied, so I simply tightened the axle nut to the OEM position so that the white paint on the nut would line up with the cutout portion on the wheel hub. Once you're satisfied with how tight the axle nut is, use a hammer and a chisel to stake the axle nut. Once the axle nut is in place, you should be able to use a rubber mallet to tap the axle nut dust cover back into place. Don't forget to use a 10mm socket to reinstall the two bolts securing the brake line mount to the wheel knuckle. Torque these to 8.7 foot-pounds. The last thing you want to do is reinstall the front wheel knuckle. If you need help doing that, I've got videos that will be linked down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment down below for any DIY you'd like to see in the future.